Hi, guys. Welcome back to the Resilience Pod. You're here with me, your host, Reena Singh. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I am truly, truly grateful. The speed and scope of the COVID-19 coronavirus crisis poses extraordinary challenges for leaders in today's organizations. A fundamental rule of crisis management is to exercise as much control as possible whilst events unfold. It's so prevalent, but so much right now is not in our control. It's crazy and mind boggling too. Crises have a way of essentially being revealing, course correcting, and recalibrating what leadership really means. There are characteristics to it. My next guest on the pod will discuss exactly this and so much more. She has over 30 years' experience helping organizations develop the skills, wit, and grit to succeed regardless of what happens. Wow. On top of this impressive profile, she also has a suite of publications and patents. She is also sought after for her views by international media, TV, radio, newspapers, and magazines. Guys, I've seen her in some of these. She is also a keynote speaker and an influencer. So, guys, please welcome in joining me my very next guest on the Resilience Pod, CEO and founder of the business resilience company, Dr. Sandra Bell. Hi, Sandy.
Hi, Rena. Thank you for the wonderful introduction.
You are welcome. How are you today?
I'm very well. I'm very well. Like everybody else, I'm sort of social distancing. I've got myself. I'm in the upstairs office. My husband is working in what he calls the open plan office, which we sometimes downstairs, which is what we sometimes call the lounge. And the children are in the cafeteria, which is sometimes known as the kitchen. But yes, that's in our lockdown state, we're all working quite well. Thank you.
Oh, fabulous. I love those analogies. It's great. And a lot of our households are definitely in the same situation. So thank you. And thank you so much for joining us today. Today's chat, which I've alluded to, is going to be all about crisis leadership in a
Mhm.
global pandemic. We're actually in the heart of that now. And, let's just kick right off into it. I'd like to ask you, why is crisis leadership so essential right now in this pandemic?
Well, I think it's a distinction between, what's a crisis and what's actually an emergency.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes up to a pandemic, so a pandemic being, sort of illness that is in, multiple areas. Certainly, sort of now we've got a global pandemic going right across
Mm-hmm.
the world that is having an impact both on sort of the health, the human, but also the business. That creates a situation that is abnormal, it's unstable, um, and it's sort of in the unknown. And so,
Mm-hmm.
therefore, what that means is that if businesses or indeed people are going to survive, they're going to need to make choices. So,
Mm-hmm.
choices between do I do this or do I do that, and strategic choices about the organization. And so that defines a crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you think about an emergency, you can probably manage an emergency, which is, just something, small that goes wrong, but it's got well, not small, it can be huge, but you've got a standard way of dealing with it, then you can manage that process. But actually, if you're going to have to make big strategic decisions about the direction that you're going or what you actually do, then actually you're going to need leadership. And that's where that
Mm-hmm.
crisis leadership comes into play. And, as we know, our organizations, have been massively hit by the social distancing and the lockdown
Mm-hmm.
and all the governmental interventions that are
Mm-hmm.
required in order to save lives. And
Mm-hmm.
absolutely, right. But that economic impact has obviously it had a knock-on effect for business. And so businesses have now got to rise to the challenge to
Yeah.
see and seek the opportunity in that situation. And that's
Mm.
really where the leadership and the crisis leadership comes in.
It's it's ever so prevalent at this time. However, as resilience professionals, we have this challenge all the time about training our crisis leadership, making them buy into this. How, in your experiences, have leaders ever actually experienced and this such a long pandemic before, and are they truly ready for dealing with something like this?
Well, I think there's two parts, Rena. You've got
Okay.
your sort of elements that you can teach, and if you like,
Mm-hmm.
train of crisis. So leadership. So all crisis leadership need to understand sort of action-oriented decision making.
Yeah.
They need to be able to understand the goals, and they need to be able to direct people to do what they need to do.
Mm-hmm.
They need to be able to communicate, openly and honestly. And again,
Mm-hmm.
those are skills that they can be taught. And they also need to be able to manage multidisciplinary teams
Mm-hmm.
to make sure things get done. Because crisis management, as we know, is a team sport. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
solo endeavor. Okay, the leader is really important, but actually, if they haven't got a team behind them with the expertise, then nothing really is going to happen. But actually, the things that are going to allow an organization and would define the crisis leadership within a sort of crisis, the uncertainty that we have now, are not
Mm.
things that can be taught, so not skills, but they're more
Mm-hmm.
personality traits. So they're
Right.
things like charisma. So, for
Mm-hmm.
example, being able to have the personality from which people can relate to and wish to follow. They're
Mm-hmm.
like being able to have a vision for the future that they can make real, and that they get people can actually buy into and want to buy into so that they can
Yeah.
follow. They need to be able to have strategic vision. So they need to be able to rise above having these sort of the seeing what the tactical responses are to actually
Mm-hmm.
looking at the cause and the root cause, and solving that problem, and not going just responding back to where they were, but seeing the opportunity and moving forward. And then finally, which is really, really important in this situation, they need to be able to express emotion.
Mm-hmm.
We're all taught in our various management and leadership things that expressing emotion is a bad thing.
Mm.
So if you sort of laugh at the wrong time, it's really bad. If you
Yeah.
smile, if you etc., if you show anger, etc., it's really bad. However, in this situation, the ability to express sadness, the ability to express compassion, are things that are going to set people apart. So those are sort of traits. They're
Mm-hmm.
not things that can be taught. They're things that certainly can be coached.
Yeah.
But a lot of leaders will need that in their normal leadership, not just in the
Mm-hmm.
crisis situation. Um, so I think coming back to your original, question, um,
Mm.
leaders, once they, if it's in a crisis situation, leaders will come to the fore,
Mm-hmm.
because if it's just got those management skills, then they're going to start failing, and they're going to start, feeling very uncomfortable, and so therefore somebody else will step in, and so
Yeah.
they generally self-select, I find.
Yeah. It's a crazy time, and you described the characteristics behind um, a kind of a good crisis leadership, which is really interesting. Could we delve a bit deeper into them? So you mentioned charisma and vision.
Yeah.
And a lot of our leaders in our organizations right now will have formed a crisis management team, and they'll be dealing with this incident. How can they express their charisma and vision? I mean, I guess that links into your expressing emotion. Like, do the two link together?
I think they do. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's about, and there's a phrase that's been going around in the leadership literature. It's about being an authentic leader. So it's
Okay.
being yourself,
Mm.
not not putting it on, just going through the motions, but actually being somebody or something that you can follow. I mean, we used to think that charisma was something that was a trait, that it was an enigmatic thing,
Yeah.
that only a few people had.
Yeah.
But actually, there's an art and science to it, and certainly the science you can learn, and the art you can practice and be coached. So,
Mhm.
so one of the things about charisma is that you can simultaneously project your own value whilst
Mhm.
making other people feel valued at the same time.
Okay. Yeah.
So one of the things, so some of the researchers have looked at, and they looked at, what are the things that charismatic leaders do on a
Mhm.
general basis, and what you see is that they focus on an individual as an individual, because the
Mm.
leadership is about individuals investing in them. So therefore, if they don't invest in the followers, then
Mhm.
those followers are not going to in turn invest in them. So simple
Mhm.
tricks like active listening.
Yeah.
So whereby you're absolutely focusing on not just what people are saying, but also on their body language, and then
Mhm.
very importantly, playing that back to demonstrate that you've understood it
Mhm.
will show the person, the potential follower, that how valuable they are, and that is really, really good. Now that is good in a crisis situation, because as
Mhm.
you know what it's like in a crisis situation. You
Yeah.
can be pulled left, right, and centre,
Yeah.
and so having the discipline to be able to stop and focus on an individual is just so powerful. It's so
Mhm.
powerful to the individual because they feel important, but it is
Mhm.
also really powerful to the leader, because it
Mhm.
gives them that breathing space, that time. It unclutters the
Right.
mind. It allows
Mhm.
them to focus on that one thing and that one important thing. And so, that's something that's really good. Um, I mean, the other thing about charisma is that charismatic leaders are seen to be able to sort of manage their own body language.
Mhm.
And not just the body, but also the voice. I
Right.
mean, we all see sort of various politicians, and it's standard practice nowadays
Mm.
to actually have, body language coach and a voice coach.
Mhm.
So, for example, a deeper voice, a deeper tone, a slower
Right.
diction conveys
Mhm.
trust. A wide stance is very much of strength and openness. And so,
Mhm.
all of these things are all tools that a leader can learn, and then learn to use to their own advantage,
Mm.
as long as it's done, and practice and coaching and time again will allow them to be able to do that in an authentic manner.
Yeah, absolutely. And what it sounds like and what I'm hearing is a lot of emotional intelligence being used in this characteristic, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, really. I mean, it is all about the emotions.
Yes.
Leadership for me is it's a privileged position. I mean,
Okay.
especially when because what you're doing is you're asking individuals to follow you towards
Mm-hmm.
your vision,
Mm-hmm.
and that's asking a lot of people,
Mm.
to actually give up their thoughts and their thinking. So it's a position that you've got to take incredibly seriously,
Mm-hmm.
and playing with people's lives and playing with people's emotions. It is not something that it's a privilege to be in that position. It's not something that you should abuse. It's something that you should use to your best effect, and that really comes to that vision as well.
Mm-hmm.
What people found when they do the research on the vision is that there are five things that it has to achieve. Um,
Okay.
it must, number one, it's got to be a positive path to solving the
Mm-hmm.
crisis. So you've got to have a sort of golden thread, if you like, to this bad thing's happening. Actually, this vision will mean that bad thing's not happening anymore.
Mm.
The number two It's got to be able to encourage participation of
Yep.
people in the future, positive, in
Mhm.
the future. So therefore, it's a case of people have got to see that they have a part to play, and a really positive part to play, in
Mhm.
whatever will emerge from the crisis.
Yeah.
Um, that investment in the vision has got to create a personal identity. So that's not only can people see that they are going to be part of the future, but they can see that
Mhm.
they're going to be a really positive part of that future.
Yep.
um, then it has to have a shared identity so that they can
Mhm.
see what other people are doing. And then, therefore, finally, the vision has got to be whole, it's got to be complete, it's got to
Mhm.
be, almost a whole picture painted with, social systems, norms, standards, and values, etc. So you can't skimp on a vision as a leadership.
Mhm.
You can't just say, I'm just going to do this tactical thing, solve this. I want everybody back at work, or by
Mm.
such and such a date when the social distancing out, we will have 100% people in the office.
Mm.
That's not a vision. That's a
Mhm.
tactical thing. A
Mhm.
vision is something that people can, of the future, of growth, of profit, of a happy working place, of all of those positive things. And the
Mm.
leader needs to invest in that, to create that. And it has to be created, by understanding, having that, as you say, the emotional intelligence of
Yep.
the followers to know what, they want, and to have that trust that they will follow you into that space.
This is fabulous and very true. It gives a bit of meat and insights into what you've just said. And it also, just from listening back at this again, um, it feels like this essentially links to strategic thinking, because you're not thinking at that tactical level, you're thinking bigger picture. Would you be able to just dive a little bit deeper into strategic thinking, and firstly just explain to our viewers being a strategic thinker means in your view?
Well, I think from a strategic thinking point of view, I mean the basic standards will tell you it's sort of having a helicopter view, so looking above,
Mm, okay.
and seeing the bigger picture. But
Hmm.
practically, what on earth does that mean in real words? In real
Absolutely.
words, so
Yeah,
um,
and even now, because at this moment, it's difficult for our leadership teams to think strategically in that view, because we don't know what's going to happen. So
well, that's right. I think you've got two roles as the
yeah,
crisis leader. Number one, you've got to survive. So
yeah,
you've got to get your organisation and your people, or whatever form it
hmm,
is, to be able to survive the here and now.
hmm,
And a lot of that is going to be, reactive, to what is happening, right now on the ground. So, for example, if everyone's got to work from home, or if they possibly can, that's about getting the IT systems in place, getting the training in place, getting the
hmm,
technology in place, and the
hmm,
management structures and communication in place, so that can happen. And that is sort of very tactical, but that is going to allow the organization to survive. But the
hmm,
next step is allowing the organization to thrive. And so
hmm,
that is where that strategic thinking comes in. It's
yeah,
about being able to rise above those tactical solutions, which is the survival ones, to go, well,
hmm,
actually, um, the world is going to change, or my market is changing.
hmm,
People are going to not quite look at quite the supply chains and the hyperextended that they've before. That
yeah,
globalization will potentially reduce. People will not necessarily want to start, working back in an office.
hmm,
So a lot of the digitalization that's happened, through needing to, is probably going to stay. And
yeah,
it's that sitting back and going, well, actually, okay, it's tough now, and we're going to have to make some, tactical stuff to survive. But actually,
hmm,
painting that vision and painting that picture is
hmm,
going to be, of that vision, is that strategic thinking, is saying, well, actually, the world post this, the pandemic will pass. There may be
hmm,
several waves. It is going to be uncomfortable, probably more uncomfortable than it is right now. It's going to be tough, but
yes,
actually, we will get through it. And
Mhm.
therefore, what does that post-pandemic world look like? And what can
Mhm.
I do as a leader of this organization to make
Mm.
sure that this organization is best placed to take advantage of that environment?
Mhm.
And that is the sort of optimism, if you like, and the strategic thinking that separates somebody. So
Mhm.
it's separating them from the the survive to the thrive. A little bit
Yeah.
like when you're watching these, my kids love the, the programs where, Steve Backshall and all of that sort of stuff get, into the middle of the
Mm.
forest and,
Yeah.
in the, or the, of the jungle. And,
Yes.
and,
Yeah.
and, and it's all about, yes, absolutely. Number one,
Mhm.
I need to eat. I need to
Yeah.
have my shelter. I need to
Mm.
survive, but then I need to escape.
Mhm.
And it's that strategic vision. They've been trained to do that survival bit,
Yeah.
so that, that's almost like a muscle memory, so that they can then rise above that and go, right, okay, I need to survive to do X, Y, and Z in order to get out to where it is.
Mm.
And that's, to me, what strategic thinking is. It's not just seeing it, but
Yeah.
acting on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, thank you so much for clarifying that. I think it's really important because a lot of the times when we hear people in our industry talking about strategic leadership, and a lot of us don't really understand what that means and might be unwilling to admit that. So to have you explain it in such an eloquent way is really great because it's simple to understand, and hopefully it will help our Resilience Pod listeners and viewers, if you're watching this, to kind of get a better understanding of what this means. I think it's a good time also for, if you're listening, guys, to reflect back on your own organizations and what your crisis leadership team have been doing. Have they been expressing the four characteristics that Sandy has been saying to us and has educated us with? Are we being understanding to that too? Because again, it's all about frustrations, isn't it? And the communication part is essential, because as a day-to-day general worker, if you don't know what your crisis management team is up to because they haven't communicated it to you, it just makes things worse. What are your kind of views on that, Sandy?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's two things. It does. I mean, we talk about a single crisis, sort of management team, but it doesn't actually have to be a single
Mm-hmm.
team.
Okay, yeah.
In a sort of, short, I mean, a crisis. I mean, in a crisis management team is in an organisation is much more about coordination. So
Mm-hmm.
it's much more about setting
Yes,
that
you're right.
strategic vision, saying this is where we're going to go. So saying what is going to happen, but
Yeah.
then the how it's happening it is done by the various departments. So whether it be
Mm.
the operations, or the facilities, with the HR, etc. So the communicating the operational picture is
Mm-hmm.
all understood and pulled together in the
Mm-hmm.
crisis team or the crisis coordination cell. Now, what I normally do is, especially if it's a sort of full blown crisis in organisations, I normally recommend that they immediately start up another group at the same time as the crisis group, which is
Okay.
the one that is looking for the return, the returning business. Now, I
Okay.
don't like to say the return to normal because
Yeah.
um, post any crisis, the world
Mm-hmm.
is going to change.
Mm.
And most crises are created because there has have happened because either something externally has happened or something has failed internally within
Yeah.
the organization. So simply returning back to where you were in the first place is
Mm-hmm.
not actually going to solve the problem. So what
Mm.
I like to do is I like to set up a group of strategic thinkers,
Okay.
separate. They are part. They are a division or a player on the crisis management team, but their
Mm-hmm.
role is to go away and think long term. So they think long term about actually where is the business going to be positioned once we get out of this. So the
Mm-hmm.
crisis team, so the survive part of the crisis team, is
Yeah.
looking at, well, what are the sort of exit criteria from a crisis. How do I know when I've got it under control? Which is,
Mhm.
coming back to your introduction about that control element.
Mhm.
Um, and then actually, where do we change from there?
Mhm.
And so, I'd have them set up separately, because the last thing you want to do is to expend all of your energy on the survival,
Mhm.
and you've got absolutely nothing left in the tank to think
Mhm.
about actually what how am I going to sort of make the best of the situation I'm in. And that's
Mhm.
particularly important in this sort of COVID-19 from a business
Mhm.
perspective, because a lot of the governmental support, whether not just in the UK, but throughout the world, a lot of those are in terms of loans.
Yeah.
And so, organizations are going to need to be in a really, really strong financial position to be able to
Mhm.
start paying that information off if they're going to start contributing to the GDP. So it
Mhm.
is absolutely important. And to me, it's, I would put a separate, I've always put a separate team on it, because that's, leadership, art of delegation. You haven't got the bandwidth to do both. Get somebody in who leads that bit, and they can do that
Mhm.
for you.
I absolutely love that because it's so simple, yet many companies and leaders get that so wrong. Trying to do the tactical when you're trying to be strategic, or the operational, it's a very common problem. And even in this time, when it's all a bit uncertain, you can see in your own organizations, guys, if you reflect on this, that you probably notice if you're very close to some of your leadership team trying to dabble into that tactical operational element. So
Well,
fantastic.
that's
Thank you
right,
for sharing
because
that.
because
Yeah.
you and you need to, in a situation like this, you need
Hmm.
people to play to their strengths as well.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people, really knowledgeable people at the top of the organisations,
Hmm.
who may be just a little bit uncomfortable with the,
Hmm.
decision making under stress, having to make
Yeah.
decisions on scant information because it's just outside of their comfort zone. Um,
Yeah.
and that's not, but actually there is, this, sometimes I've called it a rapid reflection force.
Okay.
So they reflect about where we're going to, where they're going to
Mm-hmm.
be. So you're using and utilizing that knowledge, those brains, that
Hmm.
experience,
Hmm.
in the best possible manner, rather than subjecting people to an area there where they are really, really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And that's again the art of a good leadership team, and a good
Hmm.
will recognise their strengths, and
Hmm.
they'll have played them out.
Yes.
As me, exercising, wargaming, testing.
Hmm.
It's a case of train hard, play
Hmm.
easy. It's nothing's wasted in that training
Indeed.
area.
Um, if you are in that situation as an organization or as a senior leader in your organization where you haven't rehearsed something like this, forget the pandemic, but any sort of crisis, and we're going through this in real time, what tip would you give to someone trying to manage this? Just a couple of words from you.
Um, don't try to do it on your own.
Okay.
The absolute you're not there to make every single decision. The
Mm-hmm.
first thing you need to do is surround yourself with people you trust, and and information that will give you information.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's number one. And number two, um, you know, do not just run a crisis, management team or meeting, 24/7. When I'm running
Okay.
these things, I like to have a well rehearsed, controlled, agendaed meeting
Mm-hmm.
for about half an hour,
Right.
where we, number one, it's, is there any reason why nobody's in, that is something burning down somewhere for life and death
Mm-hmm.
that they can't be in the room? So
Yeah.
no, yes, we can suspend everything. They're in there. Got your attention.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, what's the situation? Do we have
Mm-hmm.
a common understanding of the situation? Report
Mm-hmm.
back on the actions, decide new actions, and then go away. and implement those actions. And that
Mhm.
gives the leader the time
Mhm.
to decompress, if you like.
Mhm.
Trying to, just keep going, because eventually, if you just keep going, information will be coming in dribs and drabs rather than in
Yeah.
an ordered fashion. And then fatigue will set in. And then all you'll end up doing is knee jerk reaction based on the
Mhm.
latest piece of information. I've been there, I've done it, don't do it.
Mhm. Okay.
Look after yourselves. And the other thing that is also quite useful to do is to, bring a coach in just as a
Mhm.
sounding board.
Yeah.
There are plenty, whether it be a specific crisis management coach, or indeed just a normal executive
Mhm.
coach. I mean, because they are there to help. Their stock in trade is about um, helping people clarify their thinking. So once
Mhm.
you've had your crisis management meeting, your half an hour where you've made those decisions, and you're doing that decompression time, spend that time with a coach, getting your
Mhm.
ideas in order, and that
Mhm.
will help you through. They're not telling you what you should do; they're just
Mhm.
pulling out that information from within a muddled, sort of stressful brain, if you like.
Mm. Oh, I love that. Coaching is powerful. And as we are going into a this is long haul, as you say, and you said in your recent articles, coaching is something that I strongly endorse our listeners to think about and maybe suggest it to your leadership team about looking into that element of it too and recording everything, all the decisions, how you're feeling, all that kind of stuff helps with the charisma, the vision, the strategic thinking, the expressing emotion that you've talked about, Sandy. And it ties it all nicely together, I feel.
Yeah, yes. I mean, we're all human and we're all part of
Mm,
that team, and it's just so important to, in the long haul,
yeah,
of one of these, that people feel as if they're listened to, they feel as if they're invested in, they feel as if they're important, and
yeah.
they know that they're being led by somebody that they can trust and who is looking after themselves.
Hmm.
It's just one of those fundamental things that you need to do. And the other
Yeah.
thing is decision making under stress.
Hmm.
It's not easy, and
Yeah.
it, and sometimes you make the wrong call.
Hmm.
Sometimes you make the wrong decision because you just make a decision based on the information that you have available at the time.
Yeah.
And when the stakes are high in these sorts of situations, that can be really, really tough. And
Hmm.
that's where you need your team around you. And if
Yeah.
you've set yourself as being aloof from it and you haven't been inclusive,
Hmm.
then you're going to have a really tough time.
Hmm.
It's yes, you are the leader, but
Hmm.
you have followers, and
Yeah.
inspire. If you look after them, they will look after you.
Hmm. Absolutely. Um, Fantastic words. Thank you, Sandy, for that. Um, we've touched on so many amazing things. We could talk for hours and hours on this. There's so many nuances to this, to crisis leadership, just crisis management in general, the principles, a pandemic, and so much. But thank you so much for sharing, sound bites of some of your wisdom and experiences. I'm sure our guests have really, and our listeners have really enjoyed this.
Well, thank you very much. As I say, I've had the pleasure, misfortune, or
Mm,
whichever way you like, or privilege to sit in hot seats ranging from
yeah.
severe floods to um, DDoS type attacks on things.
Hmm.
And I've probably throughout my time made all of the mistakes in the book
Yeah.
that you possibly can. Um,
Mm,
but I like to think most of the organisations, or we got through it in the end. Um,
mm,
and it's about being human,
yeah.
playing to your strengths,
Yeah.
being that, those team members and thinking
Mm-hmm.
big and thinking bold.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to need to, the world, as I said, has begin, supply chains are going to be thrown up in the air post
Mm-hmm.
COVID, digitalization, we're going to
Yeah.
see those creeping into services and products, in the future. And the
Mm.
other thing is that there will be also a massive investment in healthcare and awareness in healthcare, and
Mm.
and
Yes.
every single one of those is a business opportunity for
Mm-hmm.
people. So it's tough now, but it's a case of don't just think about coming back to where you are. Think about
Mm-hmm.
where you want to be in a year's time. What's the
Mm-hmm.
organisational model for them?
Yep.
Get people bought into that, and then
Mm-hmm.
just move towards it and
Mm.
hopefully easy said, harder
Yeah.
to do, but keeping it real, it should be okay.
Absolutely love that. It's a chance for us to all innovate, regardless of where you are in the structure of your organizations. So thank you, Sandy. If any of the Resilience Pod listeners want to continue this conversation or indeed have any questions for you, where can they find you?
Probably the easiest way is through my LinkedIn
Mhm.
profile.
Yeah.
Both I've got a LinkedIn profile for both my company and also personally, so all of my contact details are on there. And obviously, as we are going through the COVID-19 now, if anybody just wants to, as a soundboard from a
Hmm.
leadership, just to say, well, I'm thinking this is this, do I need to, I'm here to help.
Hmm.
Just phone up and I'll do what I can to to help people through whatever I can do on that.
Thank you so much, guys. We have a celebrity, resilience celebrity amongst us, great influencer. So you've got an invitation to contact her, so don't miss that if you need it.
Thank
Um,
you.
so thank you. So guys, thank you for tuning in. Now is the time to begin to recast more generic crisis management rules and develop an ever more advanced level of thinking on how to deal with it, because crisis leadership in this very real global pandemic is definitely for the long haul. Thank you, Sandy. And lastly, thank you to all of you for tuning in today and for listening. Don't forget to like this, share, and subscribe via the resiliencepod.com site. And we will be back soon. So, guys, that's it from me, your host, Reena Singh. Until next time, keep on investing in your resilience.